Hi, my name is Jody Babb. I am going to be doing a webinar today. It is for a class with Dr. Trolley. It is for seminar and school counseling. I am a second year grad student. I am on the dual track for licensed mental health counseling and school counselor. I'm an associate pastor and a St. Bonaventure University employee. The title of my webinar is Immunizations, not just being declined for religious purposes anymore. I'm talking about immunizations because there's more and more children that are not being vaccinated, and their parents want them to be able to go to any public school without there being any discrepancy or any law telling them that they cannot. So parents are specifically wanting their children to not be vaccinated with certain vaccines due to other purposes than religious anymore. In the past, it's always been like a religious thing, but no longer is that the reason, and I'll discuss that later on. But this webinar is intended for all audiences, but specifically may have special interest for parents, teachers, administrators, health services, and wellness centers. My purpose with this webinar is not to push you into any direction when it comes to getting your children vaccinated or not. I'm giving this information merely as an informational guide to help parents, teachers, school systems, counselors, health wellness services, and administrators to understand the thinking process of why more and more children are entering school without vaccinations. My goal is one of education only, not persuasion. Take the following information and apply it to your life and career purposes. I want to define a couple of things for you. Immunization is the process whereby a person is made immune or resistant to an infectious disease, typically by the administration of a vaccine. A vaccine stimulates the body's own immune system to protect the person against subsequent infection or disease. Now, the next couple of slides, I'm going to be going over a few things that are requirements for New York State schools. So I'll start off with the 2014-15 school year, New York State Immunization Requirements for school entrance or attendance. Children in a pre-kindergarten setting should be age-appropriately immunized. The number of doses depends on the schedule recommended by the Advisory Committee for Immunization Practices, or the ACIP. This schedule reflects the minimum doses that are required for grades kindergarten through 12. Intervals between doses of vaccine should be in accordance with the ACIP recommended immunization schedule for persons 0 through 18 years of age. These are the health laws, health and safety recommendations, and the laws of which the education system has to follow. As you can see, Chapter 24, Health and Safety, Article 5, Immunization, it talks about, and then in the education law, Title I, General Provisions, Article 19, Medical and Health Services, it talks about immunization of children. Here's some of the requirements for New York State. Each school shall require of every child entering or attending such school proof of immunization in accordance with the provisions of Section 2164 of the Public Health Law. Each school district shall assist and cooperate with the municipality in the development of the plan required by Section 613 of the Public Health Law. Each school district shall participate in the surveys directed by the State Commissioner of Health pursuant to the Section 613 of the Public Health Law of the immunization level of the children entering and attending school within such district, and which shall be subject to audit by the State Commissioner of Health. Each school and school district shall provide the State Commissioner of Health with any records and reports required for the purpose of such audit. In no event shall the State Commissioner of Health disclose a student's identity. You can see there the seriousness that New York State takes to make sure that all children are safe, and they want them to have vaccines as part of that. The question remains whether or not your child has to have vaccines to enter school. Now, we certainly can understand with the law that's written here the purpose of getting vaccines and why schools push it so much, but there is rights that parents have, and we'll go over them in the future slides. Here you can see the requirements that New York State has for school entrance. You can see the type of vaccines right here as I'm pointing to them that your child will have to have at a certain age, as across the top here. So by grades 7 through 12, they should have all their vaccines done. And you can see some of these, DTP and tetanus shot and polio vaccine, MMRs. Those are some of the normal ones that we've gotten for years. And the hepatitis vaccine is something they added. The chickenpox vaccine is a fairly newer vaccine. And the thing is, with the chickenpox vaccine, that's something that I believe in and that parents should get to. But as you can tell, that there are a lot of parents in the olden days, and I say olden days that I'm so young, I'm 42, but back when I was a child, we didn't have the chickenpox vaccine. So what my mother did was, when one of us in our family got it, she put us around them so that we would all get it at the same time. But in that in itself could be dangerous, getting the chickenpox, but back then everybody got them and everybody got over them, and there wasn't much deal except for some scarring and maybe some hospitalization if needed. But now there's a vaccine for it, which I think is a good idea. Why would you have your child, go through something that could be life-threatening if they don't need to? Again, there are a lot of parents who don't believe that they should have to have their child vaccinated in any way. Those are just some of my own thoughts on that. And then there's some, the PCV and some other things that, children can have or not have. Not everything is necessary that is on this chart. The PCV is one of those. As you can see from the previous slides, New York State schools have strict guidelines that they have to follow. The problem is, with those guidelines, parents are pushed into thinking there are absolutes. And what I mean by that is that parents believe that because the school disclaims so much, or they stress so much about getting vaccinated and the dangers of not getting vaccinated, and then putting pressure on you saying, all the other children are going to get sick if you don't get your child vaccinated, and you could potentially have an outbreak of something. Because of that, they feel pushed. But the problem remains is that there is no absolutes, and there are exemptions, and parents, you do have rights. And that's what I want to stress with this, is that there are rights, and it's not just for religious purposes. In years past, only children who did not get vaccinated were those thought to be of religious persons, and I talked about that before. It is not the case anymore, and more schools in the New York State higher education system itself have been seeing an increase in parents who do not want their children vaccinated for reasons other than religion. According to vactruth.com, your child does not have to be vaccinated. And I listed the website right here. You can see that right there, and you can highlight that and put it in your web browser to see that. In order for them to attend school, but there is still much debate over this. So your child does not have to be vaccinated in order for them to attend school. And you can see that there is still much debate about this. There is things that are going on right now that parents are going, to school systems and school functions, and they're listening to what the educational system is telling them. In fact, as I'm preparing this webinar, I was listening to Fox News discussing a debate that is going on in Santa Monica, California, about whether or not parents have the right to have their unvaccinated children be allowed in school. And I put the link here so you guys could possibly click on that and see that what I was actually listening to as I was preparing this webinar. It was kind of interesting because here I am preparing a webinar on immunizations, and then all of a sudden there's something that I'm listening to on the radio that talks exactly about the same thing. So it was fascinating to hear that. So as you can see, not every state has laws regarding unvaccinated children and allowing them in public schools. There are no federal laws mandating vaccine exemptions. It is left up to each individual state. Now, there are some states that you don't have to be vaccinated, and that is very few and far in between. New York State is one of those states where you have to be vaccinated, or they want you to be vaccinated, but there are ways around that. Here are some exemptions that some states offer, and we'll go over the state by states, what their laws might state, but for now I'm going to go over some of the exemptions that are used in most states. Medical exemption. This has to come from a doctor. I don't know which medical conditions qualify for an exemption or who oversees the exemptions, but I've heard that a medical exemption can be turned down by a state health department. that's something that you might want to look into. I've looked into medical exemptions, but that's just for a doctor who says, okay, well, they can't have the shot for a certain reason. So that's a medical exemption. Some medical reason why they can't have it. A religious exemption is requirements for religious exemptions vary by state. In most states, you don't have to belong to a particular church or any church, but some states require a letter from a spiritual advisor confirming that you are sincere about your beliefs. In other states, such as Virginia, you just need to sign a form saying vaccines violate your religious beliefs. And I believe that's the same in New York State. I'm not positive, but I don't think you have to have a letter from an advisor, because I do know of some homeschooled children who have gone into this school at a certain time, maybe a middle school, and they haven't had all their vaccines, and they claimed religious purposes. Some more exemptions. Philosophical exemption. A philosophical exemption is based on a personal belief that doesn't have to be religious. States currently accepting a philosophical exemption are Arizona, California, Colorado, Idaho, Louisiana, Maine, Michigan, Minnesota, New Mexico, North Dakota, Ohio, Oklahoma, Rhode Island, Texas, Utah, Vermont, Washington, and Wisconsin. Some of these states require that a parent signs the form at the local health department in front of a staff member. Philosophical exemptions are those of ones who don't have a religious belief, but they have a belief in themselves that say, I don't want to have my child vaccinated because I think it's something that is dangerous, something that I believe can cause them sickness, and I don't believe that they need to have something that is of poison put into them. Because when you're getting a vaccine, in most vaccines, you're getting the actual live virus put in you so that you can build up an immunity to it, therefore not giving you the actual contamination of that disease. Proof of immunity is an exemption also. If you can show proof of immunity, you may be able to get an exemption. This requires submitting proof that your child has had a particular disease, that he has been vaccinated against the disease, or that his titers show immunity to the disease. And that means that something in his body, the cells in his body show that there is a automatic immunity to the disease itself, and that would have to come from a doctor. Some other form of proof of immunity would be that you've already had the chicken pox, for instance, and you can prove that you've had the chicken pox, and whether you've been vaccinated or not, you don't need it because you've had them. And that goes for any other disease. If you've had the actual disease itself, then you also have an immunity to it, in theory. As I stated before, we are going to go over some state-by-state exemption laws. And I've chosen these because they illustrate a wide range of specific requirements. Keep in mind that in some states, legislators are being pressured to do away with different kinds of vaccine exemptions. So the following information is subject to change at any time. The first state I'll go over to is Colorado. The Colorado medical exemption form includes options for children in child care through grade 5 and says that the physical condition of the above named person is such that immunization would endanger life or health or is medically contraindicated due to other medical conditions. The form must be signed by a medical doctor. In South Carolina, a licensed physician must submit a request in order to receive the medical exemption form. For a religious exemption, parents have to call the local health department and set up an appointment. I'm not quite sure what that means, if they have to set up an appointment so that your pastor or priest or somebody can come in and say, hey, listen, we don't want to do this, or if it's just you and the school board itself. And again, the problem with that is that you feel a little bit of peer pressure or pressured into doing what you may not want to do. In Texas, parents who want a philosophical exemption must sign an affidavit requesting for exemption from immunization for reasons of conscience. The form can be mailed, faxed, hand-delivered, or filed online. Some more examples. Here are several states and their exemption laws. Virginia, K through 12, religious exemption form, which this isn't me, this is some information I found online, and you'll see the references to that. This particular person used this in Virginia. The administration of immunization agents conflicts with the above-named students, my religious tenets or practices. Like most, if not all, exemptions, it also says, I understand that in the occurrence of an outbreak, potential epidemic, or I don't know why it says epidemic or epidemic of vaccine preventable. Okay, I understand what that says now. So potential of epidemic or vaccine preventable disease in my child's school, the state health commissioner may order my child's exclusion from school or my child's own protection. Until the danger has passed, the form has to be signed by the parent and not notarized. And notarized, I apologize for that. Now, it's interesting, in Virginia, this person that I found the source online states that she's used this, so this exemption obviously works for Virginia for religious purposes. But again, it's not just for religious purposes anymore. Montana, the religious exemption form says, I, the undersigned, swear to affirm that immunization against diphtheria, pertussis, whooping cough is what it is, tetanus, polio, rubella, mumps, and measles is contrary to my religious tenets and practices. I also understand that I am subject to the penalty for false swearing if I falsify claim a religious exemption for the above-named student, and it gives you the fine of $500 or 6 months in jail or both, and that's under Section Law 45-7-202 of the MCA, and I'm assuming that's the Montana something Act. I'm not sure what that's from. It shows it in my reference there. A new form must be submitted each year, signed by the parent and the student. And again, it must be notarized. In Idaho, the Certificate of Immunization Exemption states that as the parent guardian of whoever the student is opposed to having my child receive the immunization, checked in Section 1 of this form for the following reasons. And then there's space to fill in the reason. So again, it could be religious purposes, philosophical reasons, medical exemption, or, it's already been determined that you've had the disease. The next slide that I'm going to show is a news clip about immunizations in Colorado. I found this clip online and I thought it would be nice to add to this webinar. So we're going to watch it, and to show this on, depending on what kind of system that you have, you may have to enable this to play in your version of PowerPoint. There'll be something that pops up on your screen that says enable. It'll show up here somewhere. It'll say enable this, and you just enable it and it'll work fine. If it doesn't work, this is the link for the video that I'm about to show you. And again, you can just press on this. You can see a little hand right here. You can just press on it. It'll deliver right to the link. And again, I put that in my references also. If you can't get it to work, you can always highlight this, copy it, and paste it into your web browser. The title of this is Opting Out of Vaccinations Requires More Paperwork for Parents. And there's a reason it's titled that, because schools, states, legislators, whoever is making these rules is stating that you're going to file more paperwork. So this is what the video shows.
Also developing tonight, parents who don't want their children immunized in Colorado are now going to have to fill out paperwork every year as opposed to just once. The recent measles outbreak in 18 states, including one here in Colorado, brought new attention to this debate over vaccinations. Nearly 5% of parents in Colorado choose not to get all their recommended shots. That is much higher than the nationwide average. Our Sean Boyd live now at the Capitol for us. And Sean, the governor says even more needs to take place on this.
Yeah, Karen, I just spoke to Governor Hickenlooper, and I asked him whether he would support doing away with non-medical exemptions altogether and requiring every kid in the state to be vaccinated. He says he's thinking about it. One anti-vaccine activist I spoke with says she'll have 1,000 parents on the steps of the Capitol if he tries. The issue's so emotional, people lined up to testify on a bill last year that would have required parents get information before opting their kids out of vaccines. It failed, but what the legislature didn't do, the health department now has. Under the new rules, parents who want to opt their kids out of vaccines for any reason other than medical would have to sign an exemption every year or every time their kids are due for shots. Right now, they sign it once and never have to revisit it.
The goal is to make sure that parents get the real information, real facts, that this is not a danger to their children. Quite the contrary, it's going to keep their children safer and really keep all the children in our community safer.
Governor Hickenlooper says misinformation about vaccines has led to Colorado having one of the highest opt-out rates in the country. The new rules also require schools and daycares to report their immunization rates each year, information that would be made public.
Because a minority of parents have chosen not to vaccinate their children, we're going to harass them? Is that the kind of society we're living in? What medical procedure are we going to harass people about in the future?
Anti-vaccination activists like Teresa Rantham say forced vaccinations are next. Governor Hickenlooper didn't rule it out.
This is a classic case where it seems kind of misdirected to me for so many people not to allow their children to be vaccinated. Do we have a law requiring, every child to be vaccinated? I'm not saying I wouldn't support it. I'd have to think about it.
Now, any rules requiring immunizations would have to come from the legislature here. I spoke with the sponsor of last year's bill, Representative Dan Pavone. He told me he does not have any legislation planned right now, but he does plan to meet with the governor to talk about what else needs to be done. So we have not heard the last of this. Live at the Capitol, Sean Boyd, CBS 4 News.
Okay, I left my recording on my microphone just in case you weren't able to see the video. At least you could hear it. To get out of this, you would just... So as you can see from that previous video, that they're trying to do as much as they can to prevent us from letting our children go to school without being vaccinated. Now, just so you know, again, some of this is opinion-based, but I don't want it to be a push towards either getting your child vaccinated or not. I just want you to be able to have information to make up your own mind. Myself, I had my children vaccinated. As I stated before, I am a pastor and I could claim religious purposes, but I believe that the vaccines are a good thing, and there just hasn't been enough data to prove the differences of what some people are claiming, as in one of the stars of TV, Jenny McCarthy, claims that her son developed autism because of a vaccine. Now, I'm not saying that that's true or not. What I am saying is that I don't see enough data to keep my children from getting their vaccines. And in fact, they've already had all their vaccines and they have had no issues because of them. And in fact, I myself told you a story about getting chickenpox. My children have never had chickenpox, and that keeps them also from getting another disease that they might develop because of having chickenpox, and that's shingles. So, and I've had shingles a couple times, and it's very painful. So if I could do something that would prevent pain or some kind of disease or disfigurement because of the chickenpox, then I'm all for that. But again, that's my opinion. I don't want you to feel pressured or not pressured. Opting out of vaccination has become harder for parents in some states, including Colorado, where it seems that they have purposely piled on the paperwork for the parents to deter them, and by doing so, they feel forced into getting the vaccinations. We talked about that. It's just something that maybe the state is doing, maybe they're not doing it. Maybe they're just trying to cover themselves to make sure that they're protected if an epidemic or pandemic breaks out. Legislators know that if it's too hard of a process for parents to opt out, then most parents will not choose to do so, therefore assuring that children are getting all vaccinations and keeping them up to date. This is a tough subject and a debate that has been going on for years. And you can see from the video that I showed you, which was just recently, and then from watching the Fox News, that it's going on right now, today. And I don't know if there will ever be something settled in the matter, if there will be just something simple that you can just say, hey, you can go in there, sign as a parent, say, I don't want my child to be vaccinated or whatever, that you sign a disclaimer instead of having to fill out tons and tons of paperwork. But I know that as it stands now for New York State, it's a little bit more than just saying, I opt out to have my children vaccinated, and then the school just saying, okay, your child can enter, because they want to make sure that their school is protected, the children in the school are protected, which I understand that, and then your child itself, himself or herself, is protected also. But again, it has to be left up to the whole individual, as a family, the individual parents, the child, and the family members themselves, to decide whether or not you should have vaccinations. Again, that's something that I feel, and the whole point of this webinar was to show that it's not just for religious purposes anymore. They're opting out for medical purposes. They're opting out for philosophical reasons, for medical reasons, such as autism that we talked about. There are a lot of parents who believe that children are getting certain disorders, such as autism, due to being vaccinated. Again, that's something that you should research. You shouldn't take my opinion on it or anybody's opinion on it. You should research it and see what's best for your family. And then you can determine, by state if you have to, or, find an alternative to going to school if they won't let you into school. So that's something that you will have to figure out for yourself. Well, this is the end of the presentation. Here are my references for all the research that I did. I hope that you would go ahead and look at those and decide whether or not the information I give you is enough information for you to make a decision. And here is some more references to go along with that. I also included the book that we have for the class, immunization section. It's by Mainzer. The A to Z of School Counseling in New York State, and it's the 5th edition, pages 78 through 81, and it talks about all of what I discussed, and it even gives you that form that I showed you about all the different types of vaccines that you need to be able to enter school. But hopefully you will look at these references and then click on some of these to take a look for yourself. Thank you.